There we go. I'll start again for the crowd at home. Welcome to Communitas this morning. Those of you who are still with us and haven't disappeared for the summer, I think this last week we lost another load of students who are back home from the summer, but glad you're here. A cooler day, so that's kind of nice. There's some new faces, so after the service, make sure you get to know them. And I don't want to call Vinay a new face, but we haven't seen you for a while, so I'm glad you're still alive on the earth and glad you're with us today. And after the service, make sure you meet new people. If you're going out to eat or something, maybe drag them along, see if they want to find out places to eat. So do that. But this morning, oops, got to turn this on, give it a little power here. We're finishing up 4 weeks in this one section of 1 Corinthians, and with today we're kind of going to put a pause on 1 Corinthians and pick that up again in September. But this is kind of a key verse that I want us to reflect on a little bit as we begin this morning. So whether you eat or drink, and of course eating and drinking is always a part of life. That's one of the reasons Paul talks about it. And, again, there's coffee and tea. If you hadn't had a chance to get some, feel free to do that. But whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all to the glory of God. And in a little bit, we'll talk about what was in Paul's mind as he said that, because he has something more specific in mind about glorifying God. For him, it's not kind of just this general spiritual term, let's all glorify God. He's got something in mind, and we'll talk about that. But certainly, if we're to do everything for the glory of God, what we're going to do in the next hour, we want it to be for God's glory. Whether we're listening to the Word, whether we're singing, or even just interacting with one another, even how we have a conversation, we can have a kind of conversation that especially glorifies God. And so just take a moment and maybe prepare your heart and mind and just determine right now in your heart that you will do your best in the next hour and a half to do what we do for the glory of God. Whatever reason you have for coming here, and I'm sure most of you have many different reasons why you've come on the Sunday morning, but whatever your reasons for being here, God has reasons for us being here, and so let's glorify God by participating in His purposes. So take a moment just to determine in your heart that we're going to glorify God this morning. Now, Lord, this morning we're here for you, and you are here with us, and you are here for us, for our good, and you are here for the sake of your kingdom. And I pray that all of these things will come together and we will experience you, and we will find joy in being here this morning, and you will delight in being here with us as well. Amen. So Isaac and band is coming up.
Good morning, church. Please stand up and worship the Lord along with us. One, two, three, go.
Down into the the more I love you. I wanna sit at your feet, drink from the cup in your hands, lay back against you and breathe, feel your heartbeat. This love is so deep, it's more than I can stand. I'm met in your peace, so overwhelming. The more I seek you, the more I find you. The more I find you, the more I love you. I wanna sit at your feet, drink from the cup in your hand, lay back against you and breathe, feel your heartbeat. This love is so deep, it's more than I can stand. I feel in your peace, it's overwhelming. I wanna sit at your feet, drink from the cup in your hand, lay back against you and breathe, feel your heartbeat. This love is so deep, it's more than I can stand. I'm melt in your peace, it's overwhelming. The more I seek you, the more I find you. The more I find you, the more I love you. Thank you for the cross, Lord. Thank you, God. Thank you for the price you paid, bearing all my sins and shame. In love you came and gave amazing grace. Thank you for the love. Thank you for the nail piercings. Wash me in your cleansing flow. Now all I know, your forgiveness and embrace. Worthy is the Lamb, seated on the throne. Thank you for the price you paid, bearing all my sins and shame. In love you came and gave amazing grace.
Thank you for this love.
Thank you, God. Thank you for the nails pierced. Wash me in your cleansing flow. Now all I know, your forgiveness and grace. Worthy is the Lamb seated on the throne. I crown you now with many crowns. You reign victorious. High and lifted up.
High and lifted up.
Jesus, Son of God, the darling of heaven, crucified. Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb seated on the throne. I crown you now with many crowns. You reign victorious. I am lifted up. I am lifted up. Jesus, Son of God,
The darling of heaven, crucified.
Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb. Oh, worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb.
Once again, welcome here. Thanks for joining us. If you came late, no problem. As always, feel free to get coffee and tea or move around. Yeah, I'm glad you're here. Glad a few of you will stick with us through the summer and hope it'll be a good summer for you. Just a couple of announcements quickly. Number one, next week, baptism. Okay, Victoria Pikevich will be baptized, and then our Pippi is going to be baptized. By the way, Archers and League and family aren't here because Marian has a football match today, so you might be praying for them this morning that Marian will do well, but that's why they're not here. But those two will be baptized next Sunday. It'll be after the service. We'll have more or less regular service here, and then after the service, we'll go. Where we're going to end up doing it is where we've had the baptisms in the past, back before COVID when we were baptizing. So it'll be just across the river at Lutsavsala. Is that, am I pronouncing that right? Okay, at that park, so you can actually walk there if you want. And the Salutils Bridge, you can actually walk underneath it or drive there. Probably like if you're walking, which direction? Yeah, this walking that way and you cross the bridge, we'll probably do it to the left and not the right. Most of the park is kind of at the right, but we'll probably have the baptism They're on the left. Also, we'll have a picnic there, so bring food to share. If you don't have food, just come anyway. Someone will probably have something. But that's next Sunday after the service, so it'll be nice. It's been a few years since we've had a baptism, so I'm looking forward to that. It's a good time to celebrate, Victoria and Pippi, and then, like I said, probably in the autumn, we'll have another baptism. Okay. And then one other, I don't know if this is an announcement or what, but Gary Lansdowne wanted me to share something with you. He was in Ukraine just a couple weeks ago. This picture is taken just about 8 kilometers from the front. Gary brought this to us from Ukraine as a gift to the church, and he wrote this: "Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for your gift to purchase MP3 audio Bibles for Ukraine soldiers. These were given personally to a unit serving 8 kilometers from the Russian border. God bless Gary Lansdowne." And he wrote that because the church had given some money. I think we gave €300, I think, for him to get a number of these audio Bibles, and he was able to go close to the front lines and hand deliver those to Ukrainian soldiers. So that was his thank you to us for giving that gift. Right now, I think Gary is in Thailand because he's always traveling around doing crazy things, so you might remember to pray for him. But in any case, he wanted us to share this thank you with you. By the way, if you're new here, we don't talk a lot about money. There is a box in the back, which you're welcome to use. On our website, you can find the bank information where you can transfer automatically. But just so you know where that money goes, obviously some goes to using this hall. We have to pay a little bit for this, and coffee and tea, and there's some of those expenses. But generally, we try to get rid of our money for mission purposes, and we're often looking for reasons to get rid of it, and so we were happy to help Gary with this, and there's other mission projects that we are involved in. So if you're wondering what happens to money that you give to the church, some of it goes to kind of maintain the monster, so to speak, but a lot of it is for missional purposes. Okay, I don't think there's any other announcements, are there? Yes. Oh, Friday is, Yanni, if you're new here, and many of you are new here, Midsummer is like the big thing in Latvia. I don't know, it might even be bigger than Christmas and Easter, I'm not sure. But you might be surprised on Friday if you're walking the streets of Riga and there's no one there. I think most Latvians are going to disappear to the countryside. They're going to build a fire and get drunk and jump over the fire and, hopefully safely. But it's a big thing here. We will probably not be getting drunk ourselves, okay? But, if you don't have another invitation or a place to be on Friday for the Ligua celebration, let me know, because there will be people coming over to our place just to hang out. So there's a place for you if you don't have another invitation. But anyway, that's Friday, and like I said, if you've not been here at Midsummer, it's a weird feeling, to walk around Riga when the streets are empty. But yeah, anyway, that's this week, and enjoy that. All right. Anyway, 1 Corinthians, and we're finishing up looking at 1 Corinthians 8 to chapter 11, verse 1. But I want you to just take a moment to look at this picture and just think in your mind what that means to you, what you think that is about. Anyone want to share your thoughts about that picture, or what you think that is illustrating? Okay, well, they're crackpots for sure. Okay. So yeah, it looks like the guy on the left is trying to copy. Why would someone do that? Okay. Yeah, there's certainly imitation going on here. And what I find interesting about this is, when you're imitating someone, you generally don't think of imitating their cracks. That's things that might look like flaws are not generally the things you might think you want to imitate. But this guy seems to be willing to put himself in the place of this other guy, and even to have the image of being cracked as well. The guy on the right, or the girl, they're kind of gender-free, is a cracked pot, and the figure on the left is willing to appear as a cracked pot, whether or not there are cracks there. But that's one of the main themes of the text we're looking at as we kind of finish up these 3 chapters in 1 Corinthians, just to orient you to the big picture. I know I often do this. Maybe some of you get irritated with me when I kind of step back and look at the big picture. I find it helpful to do that. But if you recall, starting in chapter 7, Paul begins to answer some questions that the Corinthians have asked him. They've written a letter. There were a number of letters that passed back and forth between Paul and this church. And they had written a letter to Paul, and they had asked a number of different questions. And starting in chapter 7, Paul begins to answer those questions. They had asked some questions about marriage and singleness. And in chapter 7, Paul answers those questions and helps them to think through how to make good decisions. And then starting in chapter 8, Paul begins to answer questions that they asked about eating meat that was offered to idols, and in general, what is their relationship supposed to be to kind of their pagan past and the pagan world that is around them. And for several weeks, we've been looking at how Paul very carefully negotiates that without giving a lot of absolutes. He's forcing them. They've got to think through their context and so forth. There's certainly some things Paul says no, but there's other things are kind of yes, maybe, no, maybe, gray areas that they have to sort out. And then when we pick back up in 1 Corinthians, we'll come to chapter 12 when Paul answers questions about speaking in tongues, which will be an interesting topic for all of you. But if you recall, a number of weeks ago when I was talking about the structure, I pointed out that when Paul answers their questions, he uses a particular pattern to address their questions. And in each of his answers, there's 3 sections to his answer. And the first and last section, Paul directly addresses their question. Okay? But in all 3 of these sections, in the middle part, Paul develops kind of a general principle that applies to their question, but it applies to all sorts of other questions and decisions we need to make. And part of what I think Paul is doing there is saying, okay, you've got this question, it's a legitimate question, and I'm going to answer your question, but in Paul's mind, it might be that their question is not as important to him as it is to them. And maybe it's not as important to Paul as well, he doesn't think it should maybe be quite as important to them as it is. Okay, and so part of what Paul does in the middle sections of these answers is to kind of direct their attention off of themselves and their own questions onto something that's more important, more central. Okay? And all of these middle sections have something in common, and all through them, Paul is lifting their eyes off of themselves and onto others. He's saying you guys are making your decision based on yourself. You're referencing yourself and your own whatever when you're sorting out this. But he's saying you're not necessarily the most important figure in the picture. Okay? When you make decisions, you've always got to consider the other person. And so he's constantly directing their attention off of themselves and onto other people. Okay? And he does that consistently in these sections, and we will see that again. But what's interesting in this section we're in now, chapters 8 to the first verse of chapter 11, Paul does something that he doesn't do in the other three sections, or the other two sections, and that is, at the close of this whole kind of discourse that he writes, he goes back to this central theme. Okay? It's so important to Paul that it's like, guys, get this. Okay, you've got to get this. You can't miss this. This is what it is all about. And so this is how Paul finishes up this answer to their question about eating meat offered to idols. So he says, whether you eat or drink, because that's part of the question, eating meat that came from pagan temples or actually eating in a pagan temple, it's part of their question. So he says, whatever you do about that, and whatever you do about anything, do all to the glory of God. Don't reference yourself first. What you want. Just because you want meat, like I said last week, I like meat, but my decision about what I eat and drink should not reference me first and my preference first, but there's other issues at stake. Do it all to the glory of God. So give no offense, Paul says, either to Jews or Greeks or to the church of God. The outsiders and the insiders, whatever kind of person, Jews and Greeks who are not yet believers, believers in the church of God, strive to not give offense to anyone. Okay. Keep them in your mind and in your eyes and make your decisions with reference to all the different kinds of people around you. Give no offense. Again, we'll see as much as we can. As much as it's possible for us to not give offense, don't give offense. There might be times we have to give offense. Some people might find, what we do or say offensive. Maybe they need to be offended. Maybe they need to be stopped up short with their behavior. But as much as possible, don't give unnecessary, silly offense to anyone. Just as I also please all people in all things. Now that's really strange. If you remember when we were looking at Galatians, Paul said, I don't please men. It's not my business at all to live my life trying to please men. This might seem like a direct contradiction, where now he's saying, I do try to please men. And the critical difference is the context. Why here? In what sense does Paul want to please men? I try to please all people in all things, not seeking my own profit, but the profit of the many, so that they may be saved. Okay. And that's kind of the key to what Paul is saying here and why he makes decisions and the way in which he wants to please people and the way in which he wants to not offend people. It's driven by a particular purpose. It's for the good of the other. For Paul, it's not, I just want everyone to be happy with me. Some of you have that personality. If you've taken, the Strength Finders test and you have harmony as one of your strengths, you just kind of want everyone to be happy. Let's all be happy together. That's not, that's a good trait, but that's not what Paul is talking about. It's a purpose-driven, pleasing other people. And he closes with, be imitators of me, just as I also imitate Christ. But Paul ends this whole discourse with this notion of so that they may be saved. Jews and Greeks, everyone. Paul's desire is that they may be saved. What Paul is doing here is repeating something that he just kind of hammered and hammered and hammered in chapter 9. Paul says, though I am free from all men, I have made myself a slave to all, so that I may win more. He made himself a slave. No one wants to do that. You know, I mean, that's like drawing cracks on your pot, you know, to make yourself a slave. We want to escape slavery. Slavery is bad. We want freedom. You know, it's our value. Freedom. Paul says, I make myself a slave to all so that I may win more. So that I may win more. To Jews, I became as a Jew so that I may win Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, though not myself being under the law, but I did that so that I may win those who are under the law. It's really interesting what Paul says here. He says, to the Jews, I became like a Jew. Well, of course, Paul is Jewish. You know, how could he, you know, it's like, you know, yeah, I'm not sure that's a good illustration, but how can he become a Jew? How can he choose to become a Jew in certain circumstances if he's always a Jew? And it's because Paul has a new identity. He doesn't mainly identify himself by his ethnic background. He is a new person in Christ, and he still has those Jewish roots, and he doesn't deny those Jewish roots, but his Jewishness does not mean to him anymore what it once did. He's kind of left that behind, but he can pick that up again if he needs to in order to win Jewish people. If he needs to readopt his Jewish characteristics or some of his Jewish behaviors when he's with Jewish people so as not to offend them, Paul will do that. Okay, why? Because he wants to win the Jews. He wants to win those under the law. He does it for a purpose, not to make people happy, but to win them, to connect with them, to be with them, to make it possible for them to be with him, to take down barriers that could divide people from himself. He's trying to break down those barriers and to step into their world and adopt their lifestyle and, when necessary, even adopt their eating patterns to win them. To those who are without law, I can become as without law, though not being without the law of God, but under the law of Christ, so that I may win those who are not under the law. Gentiles who don't have the law and are not obligated to keep all the details of the law, Paul will step into their world. He will take off some of the characteristics of his home world, and he will adopt the lifestyle of the world he's stepping into. Now, Paul is quick to say here, you know, it's not that he is lawless. When he says, I'm not under the law, he doesn't mean there is no law. He says there is the law of Christ, okay, but he doesn't feel obligated to keep all of the Jewish law any longer, because that can divide people. I mean, literally, it's hard to eat at the same table. I mean, you know, have you ever had to share a meal with someone with radically different, you know, eating things? I mean, I have nothing against vegans and vegetarians. Like I said, I wish I could pull off being a vegetarian, but I like meat. But, you know, I mean, sometimes it's like it's really hard to even you know, I mean, you probably had conversations now to go out to eat. You know, you have to ask now, do you eat meat? Is it okay? Do we need to find a vegetarian kind of place and so forth? It's a discussion you have to have if you're going to meet with people. You know, you almost have to discuss, okay, where can we both comfortably sit down together? Okay, and you might have to give up your favorite place, you know, in order to sit down with another person who might not be comfortable at your favorite place. Then verse 22, to the weak I became weak. He drew the cracks on his pot. He became like a weak, broken pot, and he drew those cracks. To the weak I became weak, that I may win the weak, that I may by all means save some. I become all things to all men, so that I may by all means save some. Paul just hammers this. In order that, I do this in order to save as many as possible, in order to save them so that they may be saved. He started this whole little bit in chapter 9 by saying, all these things we do so that we will cause no hindrance to the gospel. I mean, it's worthwhile just thinking through your own life and your own interactions and how we interact with people, and ask ourselves, are we doing anything that might hinder people from hearing and understanding the message? Now look, there's always going to be some hindrance or offense to the gospel. I mean, Paul talks about how the gospel can be a stumbling block. I mean, in 1 Corinthians, that's where he talks about it. Okay? There is an inherent stumbling block or offense to the gospel. That we cannot water down the gospel so that offense is taken away. But what we can do is remove any other possible hindrance. Anything that might distract, that might disconnect. I mean, you know, some of what we do here, you know, is, I mean, you know, it's kind of a weird thing the churches do on Sunday morning. You know, most people don't go to a meeting like this and sing songs together and listen to a talk. So church is already kind of inherently a little bit weird to the average person. Okay, but we can try to reduce that hindrance. You know, I mean, we don't require people to dress up. You know, I intentionally don't dress up too much. Okay, I'm probably dressed, you know, one notch above you. That's intentional. You know, we have coffee and tea, and you know, I mean, John Woods makes fun of me, you know, for, you know, talking about coffee and tea, and I repeat that every Sunday. You know, but it's coffee and tea is not just coffee and tea. Okay, it's a way of communicating. Feel at home. You know, you are meant to feel somehow at home, that you are welcome to that table at any time. Move around. You know, we're not a formal gathering. We want to be more like a family. We're trying to reduce hindrances to the gospel. But Paul said, I do all things for the sake of the gospel. And for Paul, what that means is connecting, to coming close, to adapting, to moving out of comfort zone. Now, this is actually fairly important for a church like us because we come from many different cultures and different church cultures, and there's, you know, if all of you started to share what church is like for you at home, you know, there'd be a great diversity, and most of us would have, you know, the experience of, what? You do that? That's kind of weird, you know. But then you'd say, well, that's kind of weird what you're doing. We have to intentionally, be aware of those differences and cooperate with those differences. I mentioned a number of years ago I was in Myanmar, and I was kind of teaching at this kind of group of churches, sort of had a pastor's conference, and I was doing some of the teaching. And in Myanmar, and it might be in other places in Asia, when you go up on the platform, you take your shoes off. Okay, now I have my shoes on, and if we had a platform, I would probably still have my shoes on here. Okay, but there, it's an important sign, because in that culture, that's holy space. You take your shoes off, like Moses took his shoes off, when he experienced the burning bush. You take your shoes off. Now, I didn't feel like it was necessary for me to take my shoes off. Okay, but I did. Why would I create an useless hindrance? The other thing I did that a few of you have maybe seen pictures, at kind of the final night, I had bought and I wore one of those kind of skirt things. Some of you have them, and again, I didn't wear it the whole time, because I'm not accustomed to wearing a skirt myself, but the truth is, everyone in that room noticed. I mean, you could just see, you could hear that kind of gasp. Here's this white guy who's wearing, that skirt thing, and they didn't require that of me. I didn't have to, but I'm just saying it was meaningful to them that I took a little step into their world. Okay, it's meaningful to people when you step into their world. What Paul is trying to get at in this whole section, chapters 8, 9, and 10, is what we might call purpose-driven engagement. Now, last week we kind of emphasized one of those absolute no's. Paul says you cannot go to a pagan temple and participate in like a worship service in a pagan temple. You can't go that far. You have to be different. Okay? And there are several ways in 1 Corinthians where Paul is reminding, these Christians that they have to be different than the people in Corinth around them. But one of the amazing things about 1 Corinthians is that Paul never once tries to pull them out of their context. I mean, this is a church that has Corinth way too much in their heart. They need to get rid of Corinth in their heart. Okay, culturally, these Christians at this church are still very Corinthian. And kind of the gut response of churches most of the time is, let's just get people out of that world. Take them out of Corinth, or take them out of their context. And I went to a Christian school, and we were all about being different and all about not being with those pagans. It was all about being different. Unfortunately, it was also all about being distant, which is an absolute failure to glorify God with our bodies. Our bodies need to come into proximity, into closeness. Different, but not distant. And this is why there's so many gray areas that Paul is dealing with, and he refuses to give absolute answers, because it's going to always look different in your context. And we have to grow up, and we have to think about who we're with and how to behave. And it's never easy. Closeness, for some of us at least, is not easy. Engagement is not easy. It forces us, especially introverts like me, to get out of our comfort zone and to come close to people. Now, I like to live my life, like when I'm on an airplane by myself. I just want my own little world, and don't talk to me. I heard about some woman who wasn't even a Christian, but she would carry this huge Bible on an airplane because she said, if you're carrying a big Bible, no one is going to talk to you, you know. But I would like to live my life that way in my own safe bubble and not engage with people. But that's not the way of Jesus Christ. We have to get out of our comfort zone. And the reason that's hard is because it forces us into difficult questions. It forces us into gray areas. Okay, if we're going to be with people who do not yet know Jesus Christ, who are living their own kind of lifestyle, you're going to constantly have to figure out, how can I be with this person? How can I be close? But where are the borders? And I've had conversations with some of you about that. I want to be with this person, but what about this? How close can we get? And of course, the easy answer is always just back out. Just separate yourself. It's easy. Then you avoid the gray areas. Get out of the black completely, get out of the gray completely, and create your own little white walled-in world where there are no questions and it's all safe and secure. But that's not the way of Jesus Christ. Paul wants the Corinthian Christians to be different but not distant. He wants them engaged. He wants them to be invited and to accept invitations to places. You know, I mean, if you get an invitation to like a legal party, you know, with some non-Christian friends, you know, like I said, you're welcome to come to our house, but you might want to choose to go to that. That might not be easy. Oh, they might be drinking. They're Latvian legal, they're going to be drinking. Okay? They might get drunk, probably. You know, you might find that very uncomfortable, maybe, probably. But maybe you need to engage. Okay, maybe not. I can't answer that for you. Okay? Different but not distant. By the way, what Paul is talking about is a communitas. You know, the word communitas is not, you know, a funky way to talk about community. It's actually a word that was developed by anthropologists. A communitas is a community that is kind of on the margin of society. It's kind of different than society, but it's connected to society. Okay? Its difference is what helps it to make a difference to society. It's got to be different, but it's got to be close. It's a communitas. And this logo is meant to illustrate that. It's a community. There's arrows pointing in to say it is a community of people. Okay, but the whole shape is kind of a big arrow that's going somewhere. A communitas is a community that exists for the sake of people who are not in it. Okay. A communitas doesn't exist for a communitas. Communitas exists for those who are outside of it. It's got to be different if it's going to make a difference, but it's got to be close if it's going to make a difference. If it's distant, it can't make a difference. But what is driving Paul's kind of missiology and ecclesiology here, and Rick will like this, is Paul's Christology is what's driving everything that Paul says here. Paul says, imitate me, which is a hard thing. You know, some people think, oh, here's Paul being proud again. Imitate me, just be like me. But of course, here he's going to say, imitate me as I imitate Jesus Christ. But Paul knows that we learn by imitation. Most of what we didn't learn from books or even reading how to do things. Most of the important things we've ever learned, we've learned by seeing it done. You know, from our parents, from other people, by imitating. By the way, one of the reasons why the baptism is going to be where it's going to be is because Victoria, who's going to be baptized, she chose that. I had suggested that we could go maybe somewhere outside of Riga, close to where Arturs and Liga live. Victoria wanted to be baptized there because years ago, her friend Arta was baptized there. Some of you, Arta's no longer with us, but a number of years ago, she was baptized, and she was a friend of the Pikevich family, and Victoria just had that picture. That was, how long? That was 4 years ago, maybe, 5 years ago. But Victoria just had that picture. That's where Arta was baptized. I think I want to be baptized there. That's how important our modeling is. People see things that we do, and it makes a difference to them. That's how we learn. But especially Paul says, imitate me, but to the degree that I imitate Christ. Earlier in 1 Corinthians, we get a picture of what Paul has in mind about the pattern or model of Christ. Paul said, when I came to you, brothers and sisters, I determined to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. Not just Jesus the miracle worker, not just Jesus the great teacher, but Jesus Christ crucified. So that's why I was with you in weakness and fear, in much trembling. The example of Christ is to give up what we want, life itself, for the sake of the other. Jesus didn't come to earth for his own sake. It was of no personal advantage to Jesus. It was for the advantage of others. So this is what Paul wrote in Philippians. Have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus. Although he existed in the form of God. I wish, if there's like anything I wish I could communicate so that we would really feel it, is this movement of the Son of God from heaven to become human. I don't think there's any human words that could get us to understand and to feel. There's no bigger sacrifice, no bigger step down than the Son of God becoming human. If I were to become a worm, that would be a smaller step down than Jesus becoming human. Although he's in the form of God, he didn't consider that something to be used for his own advantage. But he emptied himself. He emptied himself by taking the form of a servant in the likeness of humans. He saw us cracked humans, and he drew that crack. He became a cracked pot. So much so that some people thought he was a crackpot. Even his brothers kind of thought, our older brother Jesus, he's gone off the deep end. He emptied himself and took the form of a servant made in the likeness of human beings. And coming as a human, he humbled himself even more by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Distinct, but not distant. And when he came as a human, not just as a human, but as a normal, common, poor, working man. He didn't even come as a king, though he was a king. He stepped down and down and down into our world. That was our world he stepped into. He became like us, with us, shared everything with us. Once again, it's unbelievable to think of Jesus as a baby. How can the Creator have to ask for food? How could the Creator of the universe have to have his diaper changed? How could that happen? How could the Lord of the universe, run around the streets of Nazareth with other, little boys running around there and no one knowing, no one having a clue? How could that possibly happen? How could he come that close to us? But that's the pattern. That's the imitation. That's what drives Paul to come close to people, not people who are like you. Who was like Jesus? He's the only Son of God. No one on earth was like him. He became like us. To come close to sinners, to come close to stupid people, to come close to irritating people, to come close to us. That's what Jesus did. Paul says, imitate me as I strive to imitate Jesus, to win as many as possible. Lord, I pray again that as we walk around, as we live our life, as we interact with people, that you would open our eyes to look at people differently, to see not just what we see on the surface, maybe people who are uncomfortable, who are very different, people who irritate us, people who make too much noise, people who make bad decisions that affect us. Help us to see people that you have come close to. And if you are close to them, Lord, give us the willingness to come close to them as well. Push us, Lord, out of our comfort zones. Push us into the paths of people who need you. And I pray as we interact with them, they will see you in us. And indeed, our lives would make a difference to win as many as possible. Amen.
stay.
When you move,
I move, I will follow you.
who you love, I love. How you serve,
I'll serve. If this life I lose, I will follow you. I will follow you.
in you. There's life everlasting.
In you there's freedom for my soul.
In you, there's joy,
Unending joy. And I will follow. In you there's life everlasting. In you there's freedom for my soul. In you there is joy, unending joy. I will follow.
where you go,
I go.
where you stay,
I'll stay.
when you move,
I move. I will follow you. Who you love, I love. I serve, I serve. In this life I lose, I will follow you. Where you go, I go. Where you stay, I stay. When you move, I move. I will follow you. Who you love, I love. I will serve, I'll serve. If this life I lose, I will follow you. I will follow you. I will follow you.
Thank you, Lord.
Thanks for being here. Hope you won't run off too quickly. Meet some new people, find out where they're from, maybe hang out with them this afternoon. Last few weeks, we've been praying for several people, especially students, okay? So find out how our prayers have been answered, so ask around, there's some good news about that, all right? So rejoice with those who rejoice in the next few minutes. Have a great week. Be safe this weekend. God willing, see you next Sunday.